Hey guys, what's up? Elliot from Steal Back Your Health here. Just drinking some apple cider vinegar, some cinnamon water to cut it. I find it helps after eating with digestion. So I was just thinking about 3 quick tips, basically 3 steps to give people to figure out what they're supposed to be eating, all right, as human beings. Because I'm looking around the health sphere today, and even when clients come up and they're just very confused. Confused is just a good descriptor of what's happening in people's minds. They don't know whether paleo is the right answer, whether keto, vegan, carnivore, because everyone can seem very convincing, right? We get attached to these ideals as human beings. We attach our self-worth to these things, and a lot of gurus out there can give you information that flies in the face of real evidence, right? And they might think just because it works for them, it's going to work for you, which just isn't the case. But one thing we all have in common is that we are human beings that evolved over the last 2 million years eating certain things, right? So that's the first step, is looking at what we haven't evolved to eat. And this is pretty easy, all right? We can look at processed sugar, right? Concentrated sugar, and that goes by many names, dextrose, sucrose, fructose, and that's kind of found in everything, right? Any processed thing you look at is going to have a lot of sugar in it, and our system isn't built to take large influxes of sugar. It's just not. We evolved to preferentially burn fat as fuel, right? Because that is the cleaner fuel. And so training our body to just run on sugar all the time is just going to naturally result in blood sugar crashes, high insulin surges, and that all the evidence is pointing to high blood sugar, high insulin all the time. That is just bad for general health and longevity in general. So we can cut out sugar, right? We can cut out grains, right? Because they really only came into our lives in the past, I'd say about 10,000 years ago, which may seem like a while ago, but that's really just a blink in our evolutionary history, right? A literal blink. And we can actually trace a lot of modern disease back 10,000 years ago when we started consuming grains en masse as the bulk of our calories, right? And especially in the last few hundred years, because even 10,000 years ago, right, or even in the last few thousand years, grains weren't a huge source of calories. They were something that was farmable, preservable, but nothing like we've seen in the last few hundred years. And you can actually look at Dr. Weston A. Price, the Weston A. Price Foundation. He went in the 1920s to indigenous tribes all over the world, indigenous cultures, from the Inuit up north to various island cultures, to the Aborigines in Australia. And he could trace the generation before modern foods, which would namely be grains, seed oils, and sugars. Before those foods got into these people's traditional diets, their health was pristine, right? He was looking at their teeth mostly because he was a dentist. And basically 99% of these people had zero signs of tooth decay. Zero signs of tooth decay. We're all healthy. There was no signs of chronic disease, cancer, diabetes, heart disease. And a lot of these cultures were living off of animal fat, various root vegetables, or, any vegetables. But it's basically plants and animals, right? And whatever little grain they might have grown, but that certainly wasn't a large part of their diet. And then he comes back a generation later and looks at people that started incorporating modern foods into their diets, which would be sugar, oils, and grains, like we just said, and massive rates of tooth decay, right? All these people's mouths are just basically rotting out. You're looking at high rates of obesity, diabetes, heart disease, cancer. All these things start popping up in these cultures when you start introducing these foods. Okay, so there's one sign, which is, causal. And we always want to look at, or sorry, not causal, associative. And it's dangerous to look at associations versus causations. But evidence is coming out that these are causal reasons as well. All right, because grains, like sugar, they spike our blood glucose massively, but they also have what are known as anti-nutrients, leptins, phytates. Sorry, not leptins. That was silly. Lectins and phytates, and these are chemicals that bind to the nutrients and the rest of the meal and the rest of the grain, and actually just don't let us absorb it. Right, so we're not getting nutrients when we eat these foods, when we eat grains like wheat, barley, any traditional grain. But they especially block absorption of nutrients like vitamin K, A, D, vitamin K2, not just K, and calcium and iron. And all of these are not only vital to general health, but are vital to dental and bone health, right? So we can trace why people's teeth started rotting out when they started eating these foods, because they weren't getting the nutrients vital to tooth health. Okay? And along with that, just excess carbs, excess carbohydrates our body doesn't do well with. It just doesn't. When you're surging insulin all the time, it's triggering a lot of fat storage. It's giving our body a rush of glucose that it just can't really process all at once. And when you're intaking, like in the standard American diet, when you're intaking fat and so high carb and high fat at the same time, that's the recipe for disaster. All right, because your body will preferentially burn the glucose when it has to pick between fat and carbohydrates. It will store the fat, burn the glucose, because that can't hang around in the system, and we don't have as much storage for glucose, right? We have very limited amounts of glycogen stores in our muscles and our liver, and the excess needs to be burned or then is stored as fat. But when we're burning a lot of glucose, it kind of burns dirty, you could say, as opposed to fat, right? So it creates a lot of what are known as reactive oxygen species, which are just inflammatory molecules in our bloodstream, and inflammation is not good. We want to lower inflammation as much as possible. So when we get rid of sugar, carbohydrates, and then the last one being seed oils, which would be like canola oil, sunflower oil, peanut oil, these high PUFA rich oils. Many times when we eat these, they're very low quality, and they're highly unstable. So a lot of times they are rancid when we get them. And when we have a large intake of oxidized oils, which would be these, sunflower, soy, canola, that sort of thing, peanut, when we're eating a large amount of those oils, they cause a massive amount of inflammation to our arteries, right, to our arterial wall. Oh, there's Nova there. Hey, good girl. Which research is coming out that this is actually one of the leading causes of heart disease, right? Not dietary intake of cholesterol, because that doesn't really matter. That has no effect on our actual cholesterol levels. But really this inflammation that's caused to our veins and our arteries from grains is one, but also high polyunsaturated fatty acid oils, high PUFA oils, which are also found in basically everything, right? All the fried foods we eat, all the processed foods are packaged. All our packaged foods, you look on the ingredients and you're going to find these oils. Bad news, all right? So we cut out the grains, sugar, processed carbohydrates, and the oils, all right? Then we look at what our body's meant to eat. And basically, for the last 2 million years, we've been thriving on animal foods and plants. And that's about it. Right? That sounds limiting, but you look back even 100, 150 years ago, and we weren't eating about like 90% of what we're eating now, which is mostly prepared, prepackaged, processed food. All right, we're meant to thrive on the fats that are found in animal foods, the protein, all right, the complete amino acid profile. We can't efficiently thrive on just plant protein, all right, or processed carbohydrates, which many people eat every single day for the bulk of their calories, right? We need the nutrients that are found, the fat-soluble vitamins that are found in animal fats. They are crucial for health. And we just need a minimum amount of protein, right? That is the one thing that we literally cannot live without. Right? Out of the three macronutrients, protein, fat, and carbohydrates, we will waste away if we don't have enough protein, a minimum protein. And I always recommend about 1.8 to 2 grams of protein per kilogram of lean body mass, okay? And so for me, that equals out to, I eat about 150 grams of protein a day, which is in the middle of the spectrum, not high or low, but it's sufficient. That's a keyword, sufficient protein. And it's also the most satiating macronutrient, right? So if you're trying to lose weight, kind of upping your protein intake is a good idea. There's lots of studies to support that. And then there's fats, which we need for hormonal function. We need all the fat-soluble vitamins that are found in fats. And carbohydrates are the one thing that we just don't need at all, to live. People, myself included, thrive with near zero carbohydrates in their diet. My wife and I follow a ketogenic diet, which if you go to my website, you can find her story. She was diagnosed with cancer a few years ago, and we went through a paleo diet to kind of clean up our act afterwards while we were recovering. And paleo kind of naturally leads you into this whole low-carb way of eating, which then led us into discovering keto. Then the work of Dr. Dom D'Agostino and his research on cancer, also Dr. Thomas Siegfried. I read the book Tripping Over the Truth. And basically a ketogenic diet is a very, very dependable answer for something you can do at home that's going to hopefully maintain and lower your cancer risk, right? Because it's a very anti-inflammatory way of eating. Your body's running on ketones, which it makes out of fats, right? It's an alternative fuel source that have very potent anti-cancer effects. And but basically the diet is near zero carbohydrates, right? And I'm fine. We are great. And it's easy to maintain body composition. So yeah, basically, to summarize, we get rid of grains, seed oils, and sugar, and instead we eat real food, right? Real food, which is plants and animals. All right, we get back to the way of eating that we've been doing for 2 million years. Okay? If you guys have any questions, leave some comments below. I'd love to hear what you have to think. And go out and live.